Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about government policy and human rights. Welcome back to Policy and Rights here in Depictions Media Radio. I'm your host, Michael Clogs. We are seeing record-breaking temperatures around the world. At the same time, we're seeing some interesting low temperatures, all of which can actually be attested to climate change. I know that the focus, of course, is temperature rising. 1.5 degrees is what we're actually a lot of people are talking about, should we say. That even the Secretary General of the UN has been talking about how we have to keep it at that and not let it go past there. But when we look at extreme weather patterns, a lot of it is based on Antarctic and Arctic ice. These ice fields at either pole actually control things like jet streams and how weather patterns actually happen. So that in, say, Calgary, Alberta in Canada, when they saw in the middle of July an ice storm and freezing temperatures that caused traffic accidents and slicks and other dangers in that particular area, it is actually attesting to that Arctic or Antarctic ice melting, causing different weather patterns to actually happen. Now, there is some history behind this, and that these weather patterns have been studied by experts for more than 30 years, which means that the trend wasn't originally recognized as a trend and is now being seen as a warming trend. So there's a lot going on. So there's focus on wildfires in the Xinjiang province of China. They saw a record-breaking 52.2 degrees centigrade over the 16th of July, and the city in Phoenix was above 110 degrees Fahrenheit at the same time, which Arizona may be a little closer, but it is actually pushing their record limits of high temperatures. So there's a lot going on, and a lot that we need to actually look at. And the United Nations is issuing warnings and also talking about how there have been numerous wildfire evacuations, not only in North America, although the massive number of wildfires that have gone across Canada in the United States. Not only most people are familiar with, of course, British Columbia, maybe Oregon, and California having extreme wildfires. It has been pushing all the way across into areas like in Nova Scotia, New England, and other areas in North America where they're seeing wildfires that they usually don't have a very big wildfire season. So what is really going on and what needs to to happen along with this is kind of up to us as people to actually investigate and figure things out. A large part of climate change and climate action that we need to, and actions that we need to take, is how do we curb some of our consumerism, our need to buy stuff. Do we really need to buy that stuff, or can we actually curb it? So why don't we listen to statements made by a minister of environment in British Columbia as they talk about the wildfire season that they're having, going into a long weekend celebration that might have to be curbed because of the threat of wildfires.
Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. My name is Bowen, Minister of Emergency Management and Climate Readiness, and joining you here today from the territories of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, the Songhees and the Esquimalt First Nations. I'm joined by my colleague, Bruce Ralston. Oh, a little bit of feedback there. Should I step back? All right. I am joined virtually by my colleague, Bruce Ralston, Minister of Forests, who is in Kamloops today, and Cliff Chapman, Director of Wildfire Operations for BC Wildfire Service, who is also in Kamloops today. Today, we will be sharing an update on the current wildfire situation and the drought. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the tragic death of a young man who lost his life fighting fires near Fort St. John on Friday. As I know is the case for many of you, my heart sunk when I received this news. This young man was assisting the BC Wildfire Service in protecting people from the Donny Creek wildfire. British Columbians are still reeling from the loss of Devon Gale, and to go through this again is heartbreaking. On behalf of the province, I want to offer my deepest sympathies for this young man's family, friends, colleagues, and the entire wildfire fighting community. I know that this is a difficult time, and your province stands with you. BC Wildfire Service firefighters, contractors, and international firefighters have an incredibly difficult job, and every day they go through heroic lengths to protect people and communities. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. As of this morning, there are approximately 530 people under an evacuation order and over 9,500 people under an evacuation alert in BC. This includes over 500 properties under an evacuation order and over 4,100 properties under evacuation alerts. Of note, over the weekend, the Eagle Bluff wildfire crossed our border from the United States, which triggered widespread evacuation orders and alerts in the regional district of Okanagan, Similkameen, and the city of Osoyoos. The number of properties on evacuation order and alert due to this wildfire has dropped considerably. Additionally, yesterday, the Downton Lake wildfire grew significantly, leading to evacuation orders and alerts issued by the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District. Over 220 properties are under evacuation order due to the wildfire. We are also aware that there was impact to structures overnight, and a full assessment will be completed when it is safe to do so. My thoughts are with everyone who is impacted during this challenging time. Emergency support services are readily available to lend a helping hand to those who have been evacuated and need assistance. Historically, August is known to be one of the most challenging months for the wildfire season here in British Columbia. I want to assure everyone that we have among the most skilled, professional, and dedicated teams of firefighters and emergency management personnel in the world. And that said, it is still crucial that people take steps to be prepared and to know where to get verified information on evacuation orders and evacuation alerts. Preparedness is a team effort. We must all take part. First Nations and local governments issue evacuation orders and alerts on recommendation from the BC Wildfire Service. Local governments and First Nations will provide information on evacuation routes and evacuation reception centers. People must register and attend an evacuation reception center in order to access these services, which includes everything from supports for accommodation, food, transportation, to taking care of other essential needs that you may have. People may pre-register with emergency support services online using the evacuee registration and assistance tool at ess.gov.bc.ca. Additionally, information on evacuation alerts and orders is amplified by the province through the Emergency Info BC website. If your community is placed on an evacuation order, you must evacuate the area immediately. I'd now like to turn your attention to drought. July was the hottest month ever recorded on Earth. We are experiencing the impacts of climate change right now. 23 of our province's 34 water basins are in a drought level 4 or drought level 5 classification. This continues to be a severe situation. We all have a role to play in conserving water to make sure everyone has access to water when they need it. And it's important that our extreme drought situation is not overshadowed by the ongoing wildfire situation. We are seeing an increasing number of people, businesses, and communities face challenges because of drought. Our wildfire is also being impacted. Our wildlife is also being impacted. Warmer environments due to climate change have prolonged the lifespan of moths that feed on hemlocks and Douglas firs, allowing them to inflict a more severe impact on local trees. I'm hearing of stories of bears wandering into communities looking for food because of the drought's impact on berry crops. These impacts are real and substantial, and we're having to put in restrictions to protect our waterways and ecosystems. On Monday, we enacted protections for the fish population in the Kootenays. Due to the increasing temperature of water in the afternoon and evening, recreational fishing in specific Kootenay waters will be closed from 2 p.m. to midnight daily until September 10th. While stress on the fish population is primarily caused by heat, waters with lower flows, as is the case during drought conditions, generally heat up quicker than waters with higher flows, making it harder for released fish to recover. As the extreme drought conditions continue, we expect to see different challenges arise. Farmers and ranchers are among those with the most immediate challenges. The province is working with the agricultural community as well as the federal government to support BC producers. Just last week, Minister Alexis launched the new Access to Feed program, delivered in partnership with the BC Cattlemen's Association to help connect suppliers who have hay and feed with producers who need it. Access to water by food producers is crucial for food security for all of us. We know how important access to water is for the producers who grow our food. And the province is working to find ways to limit water usage in government facilities and is working closely with large businesses and industries to reduce water usage. We're also working with municipal partners and Indigenous communities to support their local water management. Escalating water restrictions are difficult, but they are also necessary decisions for local governments and First Nations. It's the cumulative effort of people and businesses that will have a meaningful impact on water conservation. That's why it's incredibly important that everyone, including businesses, follow all local water restrictions. Every drop counts. This Friday, Metro Vancouver will be moving to Stage 2 of watering restrictions. This means lawn watering will be prohibited. Using a sprinkler for trees, flowers, and shrubs is allowed between 5 a.m. and 9 a.m. This is the first time Metro Vancouver has raised restrictions beyond Level 1 since 2015. Now, restrictions are different from community to community, so if you are outside of Metro Vancouver or if you're inside as well, please make sure that you familiarize yourself with your local water restrictions and follow the rules in your area. I do want to thank local governments and regional districts for taking this drought seriously and putting in restrictions when necessary. And I'd like to again encourage communities to increase their water restrictions, because now is the time. I know many communities are seeing healthy reservoir levels right now, but we are not sure how much rain we will see in the fall. We must be prepared to expect that our reservoirs may not recharge to the levels that we're used to. Lastly, I'd like to thank people and businesses for following these restrictions. We are in this together. Thank you, and now I'd like to turn it over to Minister Bruce Ralston.
Thank you, Minister Ma. Good morning, everyone. I'm Bruce Ralston, the Minister of Forests. I'm speaking to you today from the Provincial Wildfire Coordination Center here in Kamloops. I'm honored to be here on the Kamloops Shewepem territory located within the lands of the Shewepem Nation. First and foremost, let me offer my deepest condolences to the family, friends, and colleagues of the young man who lost his life assisting the BC Wildfire Service near Fort St. John on Friday. This tragic loss is felt across the firefighting community and beyond. It's heartbreaking to lose another frontline hero. Firefighters make extraordinary sacrifices to protect communities and people. As Minister Ma noted, August tends to be one of the most active months for wildfires here in British Columbia, and the second most active month for lightning strikes after July. We will see very hot and dry conditions this August that can lead to increased wildfire activity when there is lightning or human-caused fire starts. Our experts at the BC Wildfire Service will be monitoring closely for potential lightning in the forecast. And I want to thank all British Columbians who are doing their part to prevent human-caused fires and reduce wildfire risks. This month also represents the fourth consecutive month of elevated wildfire activity in British Columbia. An aggressive start to the wildfire season in the Prince George Fire Center in the spring has meant steady work for our wildfire crews and support personnel since May. As Minister Ma said, our BC Wildfire Service firefighters are among the best in the world. They are true professionals who have sacrificed time with their friends and family to do difficult, unforgiving work in extremely challenging conditions. I want to offer my sincere gratitude and appreciation on behalf of all British Columbians for everything they do to keep us safe. There are currently 361 wildfires burning across British Columbia. 13 of those are wildfires of note. Since April 1st of this year, 1,576 wildfires have burned a total of 1.5 million hectares. In recent days, many of the wildfires of note in the Northwest, Prince George and Caribou fire centers have been downgraded, as have their associated evacuation alerts and orders. In the Kamloops Fire Center, BC Wildfire Service personnel are working around the clock on the Eagle Bluff wildfire located west of the Soyuz. This wildfire started south of the border in the United States and is approximately 3,000 hectares in size on the Canadian side of the border. There are currently 61 firefighters, 6 helicopters, 11 pieces of heavy equipment, and a structure protection team working on the Eagle Bluff wildfire under the command of an incident management team. On the lower East Adams Lake wildfire, 21 kilometers north of Chase, near Kamloops, on the east side of Adams Lake, extensive helicopter bucketing over the last 8 days has significantly reduced the threat to communities south of the wildfire. The Downton Lake wildfire, located 10 kilometers west of Goldbridge on the north side of Downton Lake, which is north of Pemberton and south of Lillooet in that region, has seen growth over the last 24 hours. The fire is estimated to be nearly 1,800 hectares in size, and 50 personnel are responding to the fire. Approximately 230 properties are under evacuation order, and about 60 properties are under evacuation alert. We are aware of impacts to structures along the southwest side of Gun Lake overnight. The Squamish-Lillooet Regional District will be conducting rapid damage assessments as soon as it is safe to do so, and will release that information when available. BC Wildfire Service is coordinating with the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District to ensure this happens as soon as possible. Property owners in the region are encouraged to contact the regional district directly. On the Ross Moore Lake wildfire, located 10 kilometers south of us here in Kamloops, Smoke and small columns have been highly visible in recent days. This smoke is due to increased wildfire activity along the northwest and southern flanks of the wildfire. Yesterday, air tankers and skimmers were highly visible to residents of Kamloops while they supported ground operations. But let me stress, this recent activity is not threatening Highway 5, Lac Lejeune, Kamloops, or adjacent communities. There are currently 143 firefighters, 8 helicopters, 34 pieces of heavy equipment and structure protection teams working on this fire under the command of an incident management team. On the St. Mary's wildfire, thanks to our dedicated firefighters, this fire has now been downgraded from out of control to being held. With the help of contract crews, air crews, and heavy equipment operators, we were able to bring the fire under control. I'd like to extend my thanks to our partners and local community in the area for their invaluable support of our firefighting crews. Let me also acknowledge that the St. Mary's River wildfire had significant impacts for the Akum community of St. Mary's Indian Band. Despite their hardship, the community welcomed the BC Wildfire Service while also supporting each other. I want to thank the Akum community for their graciousness, warmth, and kindness in such a trying time. As I mentioned, July and August represent our core wildfire season, but we are prepared and have the necessary resources in place. There were over 800 wildfire personnel from out of country and 200 members of the Canadian Armed Forces supporting the local wildfire effort. This international support augments the more than 2,000 BC wildfire staff and 1,500 contract personnel already responding to the situation here in our province. I'd also like to recognize and thank people in British Columbia for their efforts to reduce human-caused wildfires this season. Your diligence and attention to current prohibitions and bans significantly supports the wildfire effort. It does make a real difference and keeps our crews focused on the hundreds of naturally caused wildfires that are typical at this time of year. Many of you have also taken the necessary steps to make your homes and properties fire smart. As we begin to see more wildfire in the southern half of British Columbia, take time to familiarize yourself with the Fire Smart last-minute wildfire checklist. While this checklist won't replace the actions you should take in advance, it is useful to have on hand at this time of year. To check out this resource and other great Fire Smart tips, visit the Fire Smart BC website. I'm also urging everyone to continue to report wildfire using the Wildfire app or calling star 5555 from a cell phone. Even if you may believe the wildfire has already been reported, please do not hesitate to contact us. The information you provide may be critical to BC Wildfire Service operations. Lastly, I want to acknowledge that this has been a long and difficult wildfire season, and it's far from over. This is extremely challenging for communities and people. It's extremely stressful living day to day with smoke or near a fire or being on an evacuation alert or order. On behalf of all British Columbians, thank you to the firefighters, first responders, and emergency management teams who are working tirelessly to prepare and respond to these challenges on our behalf. And let me assure British Columbians, we are working hard to ensure communities are prepared and have the supports they need. Our number one focus is keeping people safe. Thank you. I'll now turn it back to Minister Long. Thank you. I'll now turn it back to Minister Long.
Thank you so much, Minister Ralston. I invite Cliff Chapman from the BC Wildfire Service to speak now.
Minister Ralston. I asked just to speak briefly prior to questions this morning because we are getting a lot of questions and a lot of interest in how our organization is doing and how the people that are supporting our organization are doing. Obviously, with the tragic loss of life in the fire community in BC as well as the Northwest Territories over the last 3 weeks, we appreciate the concern of how our organization is doing. And I wanted to just address it before questions and then happy to answer questions afterwards. From a personal side, I've been in this organization for 21 years. I started as a firefighter as a 17-year-old kid and have worked my way through the organization to now where I am the Director of Provincial Operations for BC Wildfire Service. I have never felt the heaviness that we are feeling this season with the tragic loss of 2 individuals in BC on fires. And we certainly appreciate the condolences and the support from the public as well as from the media that are in the room and online today. And we appreciate your questions around how we're doing and how our staff are feeling. The truth is, it's heavy, and our people are continuing to show up every day to support the firefighting effort on the ground. And it's a challenging year for the entire wildfire community, the national fire community, and the international fire community. We have received condolences and offers from support from around the world, and we thank everybody for that. The loss of life is obviously tragic and something that we haven't experienced a great deal in BC over the past decade or two. And it's not something that we want to experience moving forward. The truth is that humans are the center of an emergency, whether that's the people who are impacted or the people who are there trying to limit the impact, that being the BC Wildfire Service and all of the contractors and support staff that we have around. Over the last number of years, BC Wildfire Service has put a significant effort into holistic health for our staff. Total worker health is something that we are passionate about in wildfire. We've done initiatives to support resiliency, mental health, emotional health, and physical health for our staff. But it's not enough, and we need to continue. The challenge with people-focused, and it's not a challenge, it's an opportunity with people-focused work and initiatives to look after the responders that are out there trying to look after the communities and the resources in BC, is there is no finish line. We need to continue to learn from other agencies. We need to continue to learn from our own people and their experiences to put programs in place for our staff so that they continue to feel the support that they are feeling from the public, from the media, and from our organization over the course of the last number of weeks. Right now, if you were to ask the question of how we're doing, the answer is we're doing okay. It is heavy. There is a lot of grief within the organization and beyond. And as I said, we are continuing to show up, and we are continuing as an organization, and I think as a population in BC, to wrap around the BC Wildfire Service, the support staff that are supporting us, contractors, community members, to show that they are loved and that their work is appreciated across this province. It's not easy work. These people are leaving their families, they're leaving their livelihoods to go and support communities' efforts in the fire fight in BC right now. And right now we won't know until the end of the season, sort of the longer term impacts. And so our focus is obviously on response and continuing to surge to these fires. But we need to continue to monitor how our staff are doing and look at programs as we move into the fall for the months and years ahead. So thank you for giving me a moment today. I just wanted to talk about that. We are happy to provide information through a media request into our communications team on some of the specific programs that we have put in place in BC over the last number of years. Thank you, Minister. I'll go back to you.
Thank you so much for that.
I'll go back to you.
Thank you so much for that, Cliff, and for the very important reminder to everyone that when we're fighting wildfires, the people at the front of the line, they are not nameless, faceless entities. They are people who are loved and love and have community and families and friends that they all want to go home to safely. And we're so grateful for the work of every single person on those lines. We'll now go to questions. We do have personnel from the River Forecast Centre, BC Wildfire Service, Ministry of Forests, Ministry of Emergency Management, Climate Readiness, as well as the Ministry of Agriculture and Food to help answer questions as well.
Is it working? Yeah. Thank you. As a reminder to media on the line, please press *1 to enter the queue for one question and a follow-up. Our first question comes from the phone. Shannon Patterson, CTV Vancouver.
Oh, hi there. This question is for Cliff Chapman. Just sort of piggybacking on what you were just talking about the tragic loss of both Zach Muse and Devin Gale. Can you talk about a little bit about the danger, the real danger that the men and women who choose to work as wildland firefighters face doing this job? What makes it dangerous? What are the perils that are out there? And what kind of training do they get before they head out into the backcountry firefighting to try to prevent tragedies like the ones we've seen?
Shannon, for that question. I think I could probably take a significant amount of time to kind of talk about the dangers of just being in the backcountry in any province or any jurisdiction. And obviously we provide our staff with a level of training so that they can manage and foresee potential hazards that are in the field. But then you add on the next layer of the actual conditions that we're facing in BC right now. We've been doing these media availabilities now for the last number of weeks. We continue to hear about the impacts of drought, the impacts of fire season, and those add another layer of danger. As you know, when you consider an evacuation order for a community is leaving due to the threat of wildfire, and BC Wildfire Service and the support from other agencies and contractors are going the other way towards that response and trying to protect that community. And so there are inherent dangers with that. Obviously, we have a significant training portfolio within BC Wildfire Service from the moment that you get hired. And as you work your way through the ranks of wildfire, you continue to get additional training like danger tree training, to be able to assess and understand if a tree is safe or dangerous as you enter a fire scene, based on how that tree looks and how it sounds, and being able to assess the roots of such a tree. So there's danger tree training. There's obviously aviation related safety training, and maybe I'll cap it there. There's a lot of training, and I would ask, our comms team can follow up with sort of a list of all the training that our staff go through. But the dangers are real. I think we've seen with the fire in Esuias and some of the coverage that we saw from that fire fire is extremely aggressive with the conditions that we have right now. And when that fire came over the border, we saw what we refer to as rank 5, 6 fire, which we can't put humans in front of that fire, but that fire is extremely dangerous, and it is moving so fast that our people have obviously significant training on what to know about the weather, what to know about fire behavior, and when is the time to pull back, based on the conditions that they see. And so, yeah, the list is fairly long in terms of the dangers, and I appreciate the question, but I think in a year like this year, as we see one of the worst droughts in BC, we're continuing to learn as well as we experience these fires, what the impacts of drought has to our safety, to what the conditions are like actually on the ground.
Follow-up, Shannon?
Yeah, this question is for Connie Chapman about watering restrictions. Can you tell us if the first stage that we've seen of watering restrictions are having an impact, and obviously not enough of an impact to prevent going to the next stage? And again, just why is it so important that we all follow these restrictions?
Thank you. Great question. So we are seeing benefits from the voluntary reductions that are happening. So keeping in mind, local governments have requested the watering restrictions, and those local governments are definitely seeing benefits within their system and supply from those restrictions that are being put in place. Furthermore, the province has been asking water licensees to reduce use on a voluntary basis as best they can, and we have been having some great success within systems, seeing systems be able to maintain and hold at those flows that are able to support the fisheries habitat in the aquatic ecosystem. Moving forward, it's critical that we continue down this path of being conscious and cautious as to how we utilize and where we utilize the water. Every drop, as we've heard Minister Moss say, counts. And definitely the work that is underway is having a positive impact in several watersheds.
Second question comes from Aaron MacArthur, Global News.
Oh, hi there. A question about the Gun Lake fire. Excuse me. Were there any structural protection crews that were able to get in and deal with people's homes, or was the fire moving too quickly for that?
Cliff, I think that's a question for you. You can go ahead.
Thank you for the question. Sorry, I couldn't tell if I was unmuted or not. Yeah, we did have structure protection personnel on the Gun Lake fire. Whether or not we got apparatus on every structure, I can't confirm right now, but we can confirm after the call today.
Follow up, Aaron.
Yeah, and just a general question about Gun Lake, just considering its remoteness. Can someone just talk to me about the difficulty in fighting a fire that moves that quickly in such a remote area?
Go ahead, Cliff.
Sorry, struggling to unmute today. Yeah, and it's not just Gun Lake. I think if you look at the fires that we have in the Kamloops Fire Center right now with the two Adams Lake fires in the vicinity of Adams Lake, as well as there's a couple other fires in the Lillooet area, and it's steep, it's rocky terrain. The terrain features are extremely challenging to be able to utilize heavy equipment. Even our aviation fleet has challenges being able to drop effectively when you're in that steep terrain. And I think the third piece around many of our fires over the last number of days and potentially over the next coming couple of days is wind. We are seeing quite a significant wind every afternoon and sometimes lasting through into the evening, as we saw last night. And that wind just, it has the ability with the slope to support it, the steep slope to support it, to really drive a fire very, very quickly. And suppression operations become very, very challenged. And at times we don't win that challenge. So challenging access, challenging to use heavy equipment to build control lines that we can work off of. And obviously the weather conditions and the terrain features allow that fire to potentially run at a fairly fast pace.
Trevor Crawley, Black Press Media.
Hi there. I have a couple questions specific to the St. Mary's River fire, which is now thankfully being held after a lot of incredible work. From a technical and operational standpoint, with such a large wildfire burning near First Nations community, now that it's being held, I'm just curious what those area residents can expect from a BC Wildfire Service operational standpoint as we go into the coming days and weeks and possibly months in terms of getting that fire from being held to under control to hopefully being completely extinguished.
We'll stay with you, Cliff. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I understand your question is that we'll still continue to see a presence on a fire that gets changed from status from out of control to under control or being held. And that is our goal, is to continue to make sure we have trigger points identified. So if there is a weather event coming in, that we can have the appropriate resources if we believe that fire may pop back up and challenge our containment lines. So we won't see every resource off of that fire, but obviously we also need to prioritize the rest of the fires that are burning in the province, and getting a fire to being held is a significant achievement considering the conditions that we see in the southeast portion of the province over the course of the last 2 weeks. And we don't want the St. Mary's River fire obviously to get new life and challenge our containment lines. So no different than any other fire that we would change the status from being held or to being held or under control. It is obviously our desire to keep it that way and eventually be able to call it out, which is a little more challenging with the conditions that we're seeing right now and the forecasted conditions for the next 2 weeks. These fires are quite large. They have made a significant impact on the land base, and there is still potential for a little smoke in the middle of that fire with a little bit of wind to be able to pick up and see some smoke popping off of that fire. It doesn't mean that it's challenging the containment lines, but it will be visible likely for the coming days and weeks ahead, and we will continue to see a response presence from BC Wildfire Service on that fire.
Follow up, Trevor.
Thank you for that. This one is probably for Minister Ma. Just wondering if you can sort of outline your communications with the ACTM leadership over the last 2 weeks and what role the province will play in helping the community recover from this fire in the coming months.
Absolutely. We are in contact with ACCM leadership and the community. Emergency Management Climate Readiness has spun up a recovery team that will work with our partners, including First Nations Health Authority, Indigenous Services Canada, the local community, First Nations Emergency Support Services, and basically all of the partners are involved in a situation like this to help assess and determine what next steps are required in order to move the community towards recovery.
Next question comes from Joel Ballard, CBC News.
Hey, thank you for taking these questions. Can we start off with, perhaps this is best for Minister Ma or perhaps Cliff, but can you give us a sense of what the wildfire season has cost the province so far this year?
We do know that we are in the midst of a very challenging wildfire season. We've currently seen about 1.5 million hectares of forest burned so far, and previous to this year, the most we saw burned in an entire year was 1.35 million hectares. As the wildfires begin to move further south, we will see more populations impacted as well, which means the increased likelihood of more evacuation alerts, more evacuation orders, more impacts on individuals and families and those communities. We will continue to do what it takes and to spend whatever it takes to fight these wildfires and support communities through these evacuations. Emergency support services are available to people who are evacuated and need those supports as well. I'll open it up to see if either Minister Ralston or Cliff Chapman would like to add some further comments if they have any updated numbers for us.
Mr. Ma has stressed that there is no upper financial limit which we would bang against if the fire season continues to deteriorate. The province is committed to spend and gather the resources to do whatever it takes to keep the public of British Columbia safe. So people need not worry about running out of the budgetary means to fight wildfires here in British Columbia. And that's a commitment that the Premier has made and the entire government has made. I would also say that the wildfire service this year in the budget process moved to becoming a year-round service, and that decision was made in the budget process this year, and we hired an unprecedented number of new firefighters this year at the BC Wildfire Service, through over 350, and the advantage of having a year-round service is that people then have the certainty that they have employment year-round. It becomes not simply a seasonal job where it gears up in May or June and you're laid off in October or November. So that, I think, is the future of the BC Wildfire Service, and that advanced preparation is really important. So the government has made a major commitment to the service and to the protection of the people and property of British Columbia.
Last question comes from Lauren Collins, Black Press Media.
Hi, I think my question would be for Minister Ma. I was just wondering if the province has any more plans to take steps to protect wildlife, like with the reduced angling hours in the Kootenays.
So I'll begin with a few comments and then turn it over to Connie Chapman of the Ministry of Forests. We are assessing the drought situation very closely, and different streams, different communities will see different impacts, different ecological systems will also experience different impacts. We will not hesitate to issue additional orders if required. But Connie Chapman, maybe you have some comments on this particular question.
So as Minister Ma said, we are looking at all the options and all the tools under the different pieces of legislation that pertain within the current situation. As we've discussed before, we will take action with utilizing temporary protection orders under the Water Sustainability Act to really protect that aquatic ecosystem and the fisheries populations. We do have a number of subject matter expertise looking at some of our most critical systems and determining what their needs may be, and we may see in the future, depending on the outcomes of the analysis and so forth, additional orders either under the Water Sustainability Act or other actions under different pieces of legislation that may pertain to fish or so forth.
Follow up, Lauren.
Yes. What else can the public do to limit some of the impact or encounters with wildlife like the bears?
That's actually a good question. Someone from the Ministry of Forests might be able to offer some more tips there, but certainly members of the public should not be interacting with wildlife, should not be leaving food out for wildlife. It is important that if you're in an area where you are likely to encounter wildlife, that your garbage and your recycling is stored properly, that you're not leaving that kind of food out for wildlife to access. These are the kinds of steps that are important regardless of whether we are in a drought situation or not. And I know that the Conservation Office Service provides public safety messaging for wildlife. I don't know, Peter Brock, if you're on the line, if you have any of that messaging available or if we should follow up.
For emergency management. Should mention Minister captured that very well, including all the precautions that the public should be taking. So I don't have anything to add, and certainly, as the Minister mentioned, the Conservation Officer Service is the best place to seek out some of their public safety messaging and some of the kind of advertising campaigns they do on wildlife to protect the public. So there's lots out there on that, and we can certainly follow up and provide additional detail for you. Thank you. Thank you.
Looks like we have a few more questions from the phone. Next question comes from Brianna Charlie Boyce, Canadian Press.
Great, thanks so much. I'm just wondering if someone could confirm how many structures have been lost at Gun Lake, and then sort of to that point, if we know the number provincially as well.
Cliff, you've probably got the latest information on that.
We don't have that number right now, and I would actually turn to Peter Brock to discuss the provincial number. Right now, it's not actually safe for us to go into Gun Lake and fully assess. We're obviously continuing to work with our structure protection personnel on the structures in that area, which is our focus, the response to the current wildfire, and obviously less so on identifying lost structures at this point. But we are working closely with the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District on that identification. And Peter, I'll see if you have anything to add.
Yeah, thank you. Peter Brock, Executive Director for EMCR. So to Cliff's point, we are working with the community. It's challenging in the early stages to get those numbers confirmed. Certainly, when the confirmation of those numbers is available, we'll be sure to make that public. There's a number of numbers being kind of provided, so I don't want to speculate too much until we sort of confirm that and provide more clarity on that. But do want to mention that what's very important, I think, for everyone to understand is that any structure loss is significant. We understand that this is very challenging for communities to work through those elements, and we continue to support however we can. So we'll be sure to circle back with numbers when we have confirmation on that from community. Thank you.
Follow up.
From community. Thank you.
Follow up, Brianna.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Yeah, I guess to that point, what I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more specifically of what you expect for that specific, the Gun Lake specifically, wildfire specifically in the coming days, and yeah, sort of what the biggest challenges are, I guess.
Okay, I think that's back to Cliff there.
I think it goes without saying for any of our larger fires in the south that we have a challenging week ahead. The forecast is for hot and dry conditions to continue. What's really challenging us right now, as I mentioned earlier, is the wind. We're seeing significant wind and wind gusts pushing 40 to 70 kilometers an hour, and it is pushing not just the Gun Lake fire, but a number of our fires in the south, and really challenging our containment lines. In terms of the next number of days, we have incident management team in place on that fire, as well as many of our other fires. As we've discussed previously, we have incident management team support from outside jurisdictions, Australia, the United States, as well as our own 6 incident management teams that are deployed across the province. That team is putting together plans, both obviously plans for the next 24 hours in immediate response, but they're also doing a lot of work with growth modeling and projections to identify planning for the next 72 hours and beyond, to really ensure that we are building containment lines. We have contingency lines built behind that. But as discussed earlier, the conditions at Gun Lake specifically are quite challenging with the steep terrain. So we are utilizing our aviation assets. We have ground resources on that fire, including structure protection, but also fire suppression crews. And the plan will be to continue to try to protect the structures around Gun Lake, and ideally try to steer that fire away from the structures in the communities, while the conditions persist to make it very challenging for us to actually suppress the fire fully.
Next question comes from Peter Midham, Country Life.
Hi, thanks for the availability today. Just wanted some clarification after I've been speaking with some producers and industry groups that if a groundwater user is cut off, particularly in the agricultural sector, I understand some have been told that they can go to other licensed users and possibly obtain water as long as it's still within their allocation, the allocation of the licensed user. But I understand other producers have been told that's not strictly allowed. So can you offer any clarification, perhaps Connie or others? Mark?
Why don't we try, yeah, I see Connie unmuting herself, so maybe she has some comments there.
Challenging situation in that case. Individuals can look to potentially other licensees that may hold a license for water transport or for other mechanisms under the Water Sustainability Act that would allow that water to then be used at that point and location. So the critical thing is looking at what is within the legislation and ensuring that if the use and how it's being used for still aligns with the legislation. We are aware that there are license holders out there that are specifically for, the transport of water and so forth. So it's going to be really dependent on circumstances. We have staff that would be happy to work as best we can with looking at the different circumstances if there are specific questions within water licenses. But it's critical that those water license holders remain in compliance with the Water Sustainability Act. Thank you. Thank you.
Follow up.
Yeah, thanks very much. The Sustainability Act was passed by the government, the BC Liberal government, in 2016. It was 6 years of notices, public press releases, discussions with professional organizations, in some cases even personal contact with water users to encourage them to register. So what is happening now in some regions, for example, Vancouver Island, where it's at a level 5 drought, the highest level, those people who have not registered and who are using water illegally for commercial purposes from a domestic source are in danger of certainly losing the right to do that. What they are doing is contrary to the Water Sustainability Act, and difficult decisions are made during drought, and those people who have chosen or have not registered at this point will be subject to enforcement orders. I would say, in terms of enforcement orders, if someone has registered but they do not have a license yet, in other words, the application is in queue, there will be no enforcement action against those people. So it's extremely important, and I remember that the previous minister and the previous government encouraging people to register, and we will do it again. But there are real consequences if in a drought if you've not entered into the scheme under the Water Sustainability Act. It's very important that people be registered, and priority, obviously, in any allocation of scarce water resources will go to those who have registered.
Ben from Ministry of Agriculture and Food.
Thanks, Mark Griffin, Ministry of Agriculture. And if I could just add to that. So there are a number of unauthorized users that we are aware of that have livestock, and we have followed up with those unauthorized users directly and have provided them sources, registered sources of water where they can provide livestock drinking water to ensure that there are no animal welfare issues for those unauthorized users.
Do you have a follow-up, Peter? Do you have a follow-up, Peter?
Yes, thanks. I believe that was Minister Ralston answering on the second answer of that first question. But yeah, just maybe segueing off that, Connie had mentioned last week that a precise number for suspected unauthorized users on Vancouver Island, but she'd also mentioned enforcement action taking place in the Thompson-Nicola region. And so I was just wondering if there was a count on enforcement actions that have been taking place there against suspected unauthorized groundwater users.
Go ahead, Connie.
So on Vancouver Island, the South Coast, it wasn't Thompson Okanagan, it was Kootenay Boundary Region. And we are aware that other regions, such as Thompson Okanagan, is currently taking assessments to determine who may be an unauthorized user, especially within the watersheds where we're seeing the greatest impact to the current drought situation.
Last question comes from Jillian. Last question comes from Jillian Francis, Fernie Free PR.
Hi. So I've been reporting on the Sparwood fire, the Ladmore Creek fire, and I was told that there was a weekend, they had a bit of rain on the weekend, and that this reduced the intensity of the fire. So I was wondering if someone could shed light on what ground operations currently look like there and how they have changed since the weekend rain.
We'll go back to Cliff Chapman from the BC Wildfire Service.
Yes, we did see a little bit of rain on that fire, and it did knock down kind of the activity and the smoke column that has been present on that fire. Obviously, with so many fires happening in the southern portion of the province and continuing to maintain the northern response with the fires we saw earlier, I don't have that specific information right in front of me. I do encourage everyone in the media and the public to please visit bcwildfire.ca. Look at the fires of note. We update that information very regularly. It has the operations that are being undertaken, the amount of resources that are on a fire, and the potential for that fire over the coming days. So I apologize, I don't have that information right now, but I guess a bit of a plug for the Wildfires of Note and the Wildfire app, where you can find that information online.
Follow up, Jillian.
Yeah, I also, I saw on the website that there were, mentioned that there were some new fires that were started potentially in the vicinity of Sparwood over the weekend, and I was wondering how close they were to the original fire.
Cliff, if you have any comments, we can have them here, or we can maybe set up a follow-up.
I think we did pick up a number of fires in that general area from recent lightning activity over the course of the last couple of weeks. I don't have the specifics on how close they are to the Sparwood fire, but I do know that we did have 3 or 4 additional incidents in that sort of general geographic, and we'll have to follow up with the specifics.
Okay, in my introduction to this particular episode, I did mention consumerism, and it is one of the things that is not really talked about as much as it should be, is how consumerism is actually feeding climate change, and how, especially in North America, we have a problem with everything has to be packaged, and we have landfills filled with single-use packages that maybe if we cut back on some of the packages just there, we could spare some of the oil mining and some of the waste that we produce that actually is causing some of the greenhouse gases that we're seeing. Just something to think about. Can you do without that packaged good? Or if you're on the manufacturing end, can you cut back the packaging so that it is a little bit less waste on our environment? Click that subscribe button wherever it may be, and thank you for listening. This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.